So firstly, just to say a few more words about the core modules, this is just a list of the sorts of topics that are included. So these are topics that are included in every round of ESS. And so gradually over time we'll get a set of time series data developing on those. And I think the poster that's outside actually deals with some of the trust data that's already been collected in the first 3 rounds of ESS. The rotating modules, which might possibly be of more interest, they vary from round to round. And I'll say a little bit in a minute about how the decision is made on which rotating modules to go with. But basically, these modules will consist of about 50 questions on the particular topic. They'll be developed with a series of experts in those particular areas. And the idea is that over time, as the ESS builds up strength and longevity, some of these will be repeated in much the same way that ISSP works, so that again you'll start to get a time series element being introduced into the survey series. In terms of fieldwork and sampling particularly, the minimum effective sample size for ESS is typically 1,500, which in reality means most countries are doing 2,000 or more interviews. So obviously a much larger sample size than ISSP. And the basic deal with ESS is that you can only do it if you can do proper random probability sampling. So every country that's taking part in ESS is doing so on the same basis, using agreed sampling methods which have to be signed off by a panel of sampling experts within the central ESS team. The fieldwork has to be face-to-face, and it has to be within a very narrow set of fieldwork dates towards the end of that particular year. So the 2008 fieldwork began in September and it has to finish at Christmas. The questionnaire itself in total consists of an interview that lasts for about an hour, and that includes the background questions I mentioned earlier. And it has to be administered as a standalone survey, whereas ISSP can be kind of attached to the end of something else. ESS has to work as a standalone survey. And again, like ISSP, the questions have to be asked in a particular order, because obviously the order in which questions are asked can affect the responses to the subsequent questions. In terms of questionnaire design, there's a call for proposals to take part in question design every 2 years. And in fact, there's a call out at the moment if anyone's interested in finding out more about getting involved in ESS. And the basic idea is that a group of academic experts in a particular topic will put together a proposal. It has to be cross-national, so it has to involve people from, I think, a minimum of 3 or 4 different participating countries in ESS. And those modules are then considered by a variety of different panels, and basically 2 or 3 are selected for any given survey. Once the module topic has been selected, the module design, like ISSP, it's quite an iterative process, but it's probably true to say it's more involved. There's a lot of discussion with the CCT, which is the central coordinating team. There's discussion with the individual coordinators within participating ESS countries, and then there's pilot testing in at least 2 ESS member countries. Once the survey's been done, the data is required to be sent to the archive, which is in Norway, within a few months of fieldwork, and they get the data set out really quickly. So, for example, the 2006 data set was out in early 2007. I'd fully expect the 2008 data set to be out in spring next year. So they get through the data much more quickly than is the case with ISSP, predominantly because they have more funding to do it. And I've given you the website address there if anyone's interested in looking at ESS data, or else you can follow the links through again from ESDS. And then if I've just got a couple more minutes. Just to sort of point out some of the differences and similarities between ISSP and ESS. I mean, obviously, difference number 1 is very, very obvious. ISSP is worldwide. ESS, by definition, is restricted to Europe. Although I understand there is a lot of interest in the States in some of the work that's already been done on ESS. And so they are actually intending to be asking some of the ESS questions in the USA. In terms of time series, ISSP started in the mid-80s, so it's obviously got a much longer time series on particular topics for some questions, and that's obviously a key concern for some people in thinking about what data they want to look at. Organisational structure I've mentioned, simply to say that there are varying levels of coordination, and effectively, because the ESS has much more central funding, it's better able to coordinate and enforce the fact that people are following the rules. Methods, similar modes, but again, ESS is more rigorous and is better able to make sure that people are actually doing what they say they're doing. The questionnaire, ISSP, there's 60 questions on a very specific topic. ESS, there's far more questions, 240 plus, but that covers a whole range of topics. But that will include the 2 rotating modules that I mentioned earlier, each of which should have about 50 questions on that particular topic. Design, both of them allow considerable consultation with member countries, perhaps more so than some of the other cross-national surveys that I'm involved with. ESS is probably the most systematic, and it gives the most weight to experts within that particular academic policy area. ISSP possibly gives less weight to that, but actually allows member countries effectively to vote out particular questions if they don't like them, which, as someone who's been on an ISSP drafting group, can be both wonderful, but also really infuriating if it's a particular question that you're really wedded to. And then I've put here limitations stemming from ISSP's global coverage. That's simply the fact that on any survey like this that's cross-national, you obviously need to have questions that work in every country. And that can mean that if you're dealing with a topic that's of specific interest in your own country, you have to compromise and end up with questions that maybe don't tackle something that's absolutely right for your country, so that it can be asked in a way that will work everywhere else. And I mean, a good example of that is I'm on a panel that's agreeing a set of questions on the environment that's going to be asked in 2010. And the questions that we're going to end up with will not be the kind of questions I would have designed were I just doing a survey in Britain. They're going to have to be much broader than that. Not every country has recycling facilities, for example. Not every country has the same level of awareness about environmental issues. So the fact that it's a very broad coverage does mean that you have to sacrifice some of the very specific questions you might ask in just one country. And then finally, on data, as you'll have noticed, ESS data is available much more quickly, and ESS does have more time and resources to ensure that the data is of higher quality for those who want to analyse it. And then finally, I've just given some sources of information here if anyone's interested in finding out more. There's a very comprehensive European Social Survey website. There's a fantastic book that was published last year, which looks not so much at results, but at the methodology behind doing cross-national research. And there's also very helpful bibliography. And then ISSP as well has got a website, and it also has a very useful bibliography as well. Thank you.